Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is the Thermal series. Today I'll be teaching you about the Pulverizer, the Stirling and Magmatic Dynamos, the Redstone Furnace, the Tinker's Workbench, several augments, and more. So where to start with the Thermal series? I've shown you many things in my previous videos that is currently available, but the true place for you to start besides mining is in your first kind of machines and powering of things so that you can get some automation going. This mod is based mostly around that type of mechanic. With that in mind, let's start covering the dynamo. The Stirling Dynamo, to be precise, because there are several. These are basically power generating machines. They're relatively cheaply made and are used pretty much to complement other machines or gear, because by themselves, they really don't do much. But first, let's try to understand what I'm looking at here. We've got a little bit of a UI, or user interface. The top right, we've got augmentations. This allows you to upgrade machinery with different parts and pieces, allowing you to kind of make it better than it normally would be, or worse, depending upon the augments that you put in there. The redstone control, which I have mentioned in the past, but more or less this allows you to turn it on and off with redstone if you so desire. The little information tab on the top left, which gives you a brief rundown of what this block does. And then in this case, the Stirling Dynamo has an energy readout. This tells you how much power it will produce and is actively producing, plus its efficiency rating. Now currently it is not producing any in this display, but it has a maximum potential to be produced of 40 RF per tick, or redstone flux in this case is what it's referred to as. It has 100% efficiency, which means that if you burn something in it, it will give you the exact values as what is listed in the mod JEI, or Just Enough Items, display. So if I look up a Stirling Dynamo and what it is burning coal with in here, and I hover over this, it tells me that one piece of coal will generate 24,000 RF. At 100% efficiency, that's going to net me 24,000. If the efficiency drops any, then I will lose the potential output at the end. But that doesn't mean that I won't be producing 40 power per tick, which in Minecraft terms there's 20 ticks in a second, to any other blocks. It'll just run out of power a little bit sooner than it normally would if its efficiency is reduced. Or it will last longer if the efficiency is increased. Now, if you are wanting to know what some of the different augments or upgrades are that you can do with different blocks, in this case, this Stirling Dynamo, if you sneak right-click with your Thermalpedia, you'll find out. But not on the page that initially brings up here. This just gives you a brief rundown on the recipe. Go to the next page, it will tell you the different augments that you have available. Integral components, which will increase just about everything by a factor of 2, 3, and 4. And in this case, an auxiliary reaction chamber or a multi-cycle injector. This can be rather confusing. You can click on these, and we'll tell you a little bit about them. As I was speaking about efficiency, this deals directly with that. If you make one of these auxiliary reaction chambers, it will basically double the amount of power that will be coming out of your dynamo, but it will reduce the overall end amount of power. So in that example I gave of the coal, where you would get 24,000 redstone flux units, you instead would get 21,600, but you'd get it at double the rate, which is pretty good if you have a high thirst energy machine that needs a lot of power quickly. Then that would definitely be something that would be useful. Now in the case of multi-cycle injectors, they're kind of the reverse. They will increase the efficiency of a machine by 10%, kind of offsetting that. And all you need to do to install any of these upgrades is just put it in the augmentation slot. It's rather simple. You can close it if you want, or you can leave it open. Anytime that you leave any of these menus open on one machine, when you access another one, it will then stay open for the next one. Now, if for some reason this is affecting something, let's say your power level in here, and it's storing some kind of power value, and it reduces the overall value that you can store, it will void that excess material. So you have to be careful with your augmentations, because you can lose some material just by removing those from your augmentation slots of the machines. Now enough about that, let's talk about how to actually use this thing. You place it down on the ground and it will face in a certain direction. To give an example, we just plonk it here, and I can use my crescent hammer to rotate the direction that it faces. Now if you look, this red button on the end, that is where the power is going to come out. So if I have a machine that is sitting here, that's not going to power it. That's going to try putting power in the block below it, which really isn't going to do anything, so you just have to keep right-clicking until you get this thing lined up, or you just place it properly the first time. And as a reminder, just sneak right-click with your crescent hammer, and you can pick up machines. This Stirling Dynamo is only going to be useful with other machines attached to it, taking this power and putting it to use. In this case, we're going to go for the Pulverizer. Pulverizer is not too expensive, but it is much more expensive than the previous Stirling Dynamo. In this case, you can see I've broken down all the materials you really need here, just to give you an idea of your starting stuff that you're going to need. This is tin, this is copper, and the rest are all pretty much vanilla. But you will have to craft each of these into different parts and pieces. Machine frames are basic parts for any of the machines of the thermal series, which consists typically of a tin gear, some iron ingots, and some glass. Redstone flux coils are also pretty standard kit for any of the machines. It's just a bit of redstone and an ingot of gold so that you can have some kind of wiring connectors. And then finally some kind of gears. In this case we're using copper gears, and the flint represents that this is going to be pulverizing things or grinding them up. Now if I open the Pulverizer user interface, you can see that there's a whole bunch of different stuff in here. We've got 4 output slots, we've got the recipe section here, and then we've got an input and a secondary input. In this case, the Pulverizer accepts things to be ground up here, like iron ore. And then at the bottom you would put some kind of secondary input, which would be flint in this case, because it's going to be a lot easier to come by than the second one. Which if you use JEI to see the catalysts of a Pulverizer, you can click here and you can see that flint and basalts powder are both unique to this device and can help output better stuff from what you're going to do with this. Now in this case you see a primary modifier, auxiliary modifier, energy modifier, a use chance. Basically your primary modifier is going to represent the output of what this machine makes, the general output. If I am putting iron ore in here, I'm going to get some kind of iron dust or powder or something is going to output. That's the primary. A secondary one would be there's a chance in this area here of getting nickel dust instead of just iron dust. That's a 10% chance in this case. And there's also a 20% chance of getting gravel. Both of those are secondary or auxiliary outputs. And this can be changed depending upon your different catalyst. Going back to this page here, you can now see that by adding in some flint, it will increase my primary modifier, so I will have more dusts being produced, 10% in this case, and more secondary outputs created, 50% increased chance in this case. Now there is a drawback, and that is you're going to use 10% more power, but you're also going to get a much better chance of getting more goodies, so I think it's well worth it in this case. And this will mean that you have a 20% chance of using up this piece of flint every time that it processes. Now if you have ways of obtaining basalts powder, well, more power to you, because you're actually going to be getting a lot better power in this case. The energy modifier is reduced drastically, the outputs are increased drastically, but the use chance is increased drastically as well. So you're probably going to use these up, but get a lot more loot for the use of it. Going back over here, I've got iron ore in here. I've decided to put flint in this spot. I do not need it there. I can still just run this machine without that. It just needs power. This is just going to increase the output ratios and, well, potentially use up some of the flint. And of course it has augmentation slots, which you can use to increase and upgrade this machine. But if you look here, you can see there is a configuration option, which allows you to input and output directly from and to this machine. In this case, you can see the different sides of the machine, this being the front, these being the sides. If you are clicking on these, blue represents inputs, orange represents outputs. And if you choose it again, you'll get blue and orange. It will input and output from each of those different sides, backs, or otherwise. If you shift click the center, it will automatically clear all of them. And if you do one more click, you can also see that it will just completely disable that side altogether. Now, you'll also notice that there are some arrows on the side here. This is where a lot of people start to fumble. They don't understand why my machine isn't inputting on these sides that I have turned blue like they should be. Well, it might be because your auto input is disabled. You'll need to click this so that it's highlighted and it is now enabled. It will now start accepting things from the top and the right side of this machine block. You notice it now has these images displayed. Now for this machine to accept power, you don't actually have to have any of these things automatically turned on or off. It just needs to have its power unit facing it I have a single piece of coal here. Let's put one piece of coal in. You can see that this is now lighting up. It's generating power. You can see it is generating 40 RF per tick at 100% rate. It is all going straight into this machine here, and it is now lit up, looking real pretty. Now the pulverizer, you can see it is filling up with power and it's using some. It's only using 20 RF per tick, so it's only using half the power and the rest of it's being stored for future use. It's at 100% efficiency, so it is all good to go. And you can see that we're starting to get some iron dust from this. But this is a rather slow process. Each one of these is going to guarantee that we're doubling our ores at the very least though, so it's well worth it. Especially since you can also save more materials in the long run by making other machines to make things even cheaper. And there we go, you can see we now have an auxiliary and or secondary outputs of nickel dust and gravel, both coming out at the same time. We kind of got lucky with that one. Now with these, you can also make something else. Take some of this iron dust, some of this nickel into a crafting table, and if you combine these together, you'll get Invar Blend, which then you can smelt it up in a furnace or something of similar value, and it will make Invar ingots, just like iron dust will make iron ingots, and so on. Why would I want to know about Invar Blend making this stuff? Well, there's multiple ways of making it. Another way is by combining straight up iron ingots and nickel ingots with a fire charge, which if you remember requires blaze powder, will get you Invar ingots straight up. You just crafting it in a crafting table, you don't need to smelt anything. Now that being said, if you look at all the ingredients in here, basically 6 ingots worth of Invar, plus some gold, iron, redstone, and bricks, will get you a different type of dynamo. This is the Magmatic Dynamo. If you look here, it's a rather simple recipe using Invar to craft it. Now this one has a much more restrictive fuel base, whereas the Stirling Dynamo required any burnable material. This one requires lava, and only lava. But on the plus side, you'll get a lot more energy from it. If you look, we're getting 100,000 RF for 1 bucket's worth of lava. And if I grab a bucket of lava, and I just right-click on this, it will instantly start filling it up and powering things. It does not have a bucket slot, so you're going to want to be aware of that. You're going to have something either pumping the lava into it, or you'll need to just manually click on it yourself. But either way, it's a really good alternate dynamo if you happen to have a lot of lava nearby. And yes, you can also have multiple dynamos aiming at one machine, doubling its power input. So if you look here, 1 coal got us through only 6 pieces of iron. But if you think about it, each one of those was doubled into 12 total iron dusts. So let's take out this iron ore that we have in here. I'm going to put down a new chest, put this iron ore inside, and we're going to smelt from a chest. If you look on the configuration, we can input from the right side here, which is going to be the input here. You can even take the flint, because it recognizes that only flint is going to go into that slot. It will then put it in here. Now remember, it's not actually going to do anything until I enable the auto input. And you can see it came in right away. If I enable the auto output, it will then have any outputs go into certain areas as well. Now in this case, I want it to go to the right. Let's have it do both. We're going to put a bunch of iron dust and gravel in here, but we need a little bit of fuel for our Stirling Dynamo. This time let's put in a block of coal so it'll last a bit longer, and it can start inputting and outputting things from here. I'm going to take everything out, we're going to put it all in here, and it'll figure its own problems out. Oh no, what happened? Gravel's being ground up. I thought that was an output. Some inputs are also outputs. So if you look over here, it has turned that one into flint and sand. And in this case, it'll end up using that flint back in here once this one's used up. So if you check the recipe, 1 gravel will be turned into sand with a chance of getting flint. In this case, I was actually successful. So that's all well and good, but what am I going to do with iron dust? You can straight up smelt it in a furnace, like I was saying with the Invar Blend here. Or alternately, you can make a Redstone Furnace, which is actually not too bad either. Just a bit of copper and machine frame and some bricks. We've got a Redstone Furnace with no power. I don't have anything powering it right now. You notice this is actually aiming into the Pulverizer, while the Redstone Furnace has multiple options for how it's used. In this case, I'm going to want it to input from the back, but I'm not going to auto-enable this yet. And if you look at the list, it's got quite a lot to choose from for the Augment compatibilities. You've got your integral components, which will just increase everything by a factor of 2, 3, and 4. item filters allowing you to have specific items going into this unit, a knowledge concentrator allowing you to store XP as you're processing things, just like a furnace would, and then expanded, stabilized, and high flux RF coils, which change the speed and the total storage capacity of power, and then a flux linkage amplifier and a flux efficiency upgrade. Now, you're probably also starting to see here little zappy spots underneath this power storage area. If you look at the Pulverizer, it's got quite a bit of power stored in here. 50,000 RF is currently stored. This one here has 0, and it also has this slot. This is more or less for a different item. Now in this case, a Redstone Furnace, as I've already shown you, can smelt something like cobblestone into stone. Now in this case, if I were to put some coal in here, I would get 24,000 RF, and it would smelt 8 items in your standard setup for a furnace. A Redstone Furnace, it'll smelt more than that. And even better, if it's a food item, let's put down a Stirling Dynamo here, pop in a piece of coal, and that one coal in a furnace would make 8 cooked potatoes, right? Well, look at this. It also goes twice as fast and will last much longer, getting you a lot more food. So if you're cooking food items in here, you're definitely getting a bonus already as it is. And that's without upgrades. And there we go, 24 cooked potatoes off of one piece of coal. Now let's say I don't have a Stirling Dynamo or the machine parts available to make a second one. Well, don't worry. Remember, you can always just turn it to the next one over and use it to power stuff right next door. Now you notice that the Stirling Dynamo has some power in it, but nothing is currently going into the Redstone Furnace. It's ready and waiting to go. Things should be going. Why isn't it going? Because it often will need a Kickstarter. In this case, I'm just going to grab a stick, put it in here, and that should start it. There we go, and it recognized that there's a need for power now going out, and it'll instantly update the machine. Let's talk about the Tinker's Workbench. It's a multi-function block, and you can see that it has a lot going on. It has multiple options in the middle as well, but it also has augmentations. These can help increase the size and capacity of the different storage options. This is more or less a battery storage block, a liquid storage block, a augmentation item so you can enhance your handheld items. That's right, there are handheld tools that you can use in the thermal series. I'll be covering that in the next episode. But in this case, let's talk about the Capacitato. This is a battery. For all intents and purposes. It requires a little bit of cured rubber, which I showed you how to get in the previous video, some nuggets, some redstone dust, and, of course, a potato. Now if I have this Stirling Dynamo facing the Tinker's Workbench, let's put a little bit of fuel in there. We're going to put one piece of coal and it will start filling into this space. It stores 500,000 redstone flux. The Tinker's Workbench itself actually is pretty darn cheap, but it does not have any of the input-output options that you would have for other things. It is mainly for handheld power charging. Now in this case, I could put in a Capacitato, and I can change it from augment mode to charge fill, and it will start filling the Capacitato's power reserves. Now we're going to leave that there for a second, and I'm going to let you start noticing that this also has a zappy mark and a liquid drop, and there's one over here. If I grab a bucket of water, you think, alright, well let's put this in here. Alright, hey, it works. I can just keep filling this up with multiple buckets of water. That's great, but why do I even want to bother with that? It doesn't give me the water back. Well, you don't need the water back out of this slot. It's the same slot as the Capacitato, which is getting power from this side. It now stores all the power that was in there. That was one piece of coal, or 24,000 RF. If I take this out, I can put a bucket here, and it will automatically fill the bucket. Then I can put it back. First, let me demonstrate the Capacitato. Now I could put this over here, and it will start filling back in here. It does have a very low amount. It'll only transfer 40 RF per tick, but at least you can power a machine temporarily if you want. So I need a little bit of power in here. I can put it in my Redstone Furnace, and it will start cooking me some gnomes. Now, alternate to that, we're going to talk about filling this with water. Why would I want this? Well, there's such a thing as a watering can in here, and it is a wonderful device. It's made simply with some copper ingots and a bucket. I showed it to you in the last episode. And if you change the mode over here to augment, I can take this watering can and enhance it. This is how you enhance items and not blocks in the thermal series. Alright, so before I start augmenting this watering can, let me show you a little bit about it. First and foremost, it's used for crops. Get a few of these, plant them around. Fill up your watering can by sneak right-clicking. You'll notice it stores 8 buckets worth of water. Then if you right-click on some kind of cropland, you'll notice water particles forming, and it will start increasing the speed at which it will grow. So if you are pretty hungry, this is a pretty quick way of getting you some kind of food relatively quick. Now you'll notice though that I'm almost out of liquid. That was 8 buckets worth, straight away. Great. Well, if I use something like an aqueous accumulator to feed into the Tinker's Workbench in some way, shape, or form, then when I put this here and I change it to charge fill, it automatically fills it up. Alternately, you can also augment this watering can. Let's toss in a resonant integral component. This is going to increase things by 4 times. So if I put this in here, pow, you'll notice when I click this once or twice, it does need to actually update the block, because otherwise it will still look like it's got the same amount, but it now has 4 times as much space, so it can carry 32 buckets of water. And if I take the expanded tank upgrade, we put that in there, update it, you can see it now holds 128 buckets of water. Now if you grab radial enhancements, these will increase the radius that it affects by 1. So by doing this, I have increased it from a 1 block affected area that can hold 8 buckets of water to something that can affect a 5 by 5 area that can hold 128 buckets of water. And don't forget, aqueous accumulators you can also just directly insert into some kind of item like a watering can and instantly fill it, even if it's 128 buckets, just like that. Then you can water. Wait a second, it's still only going very slowly. Well, don't forget that the V key, it's the default for this mod. You can increase the area and hit it again to increase it even further and even further. Alright, I lied. It's a 7x7 that you can cover. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video on the basics of getting started into the thermal series. If so, be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, be sure to come visit us on Twitch, click the notification bell, and until next time, folks, I'll see ya.